If you're like most of us, you're in and out of your cabinets a lot. They're some of the most useful furnishings in your home. Besides that, they lend an important aesthetic feeling. Hi, I'm Avian Rogers.
And I'm Les Cizik, and on today's program we're going to show you how to build a simple bathroom vanity. This project will demonstrate construction methods that you can apply to much larger cabinets.
You know, building your own cabinets, like any other woodworking project, is fun if you break it down into easy-to-manage steps, work carefully and patiently. So along with your basic woodworking skills, you're in business.
Yeah, in fact, a lot of people are building their own cabinets because they find they end up with a much better quality cabinet than if they bought one commercially. Not only that, they save a lot of money as well.
So if you join us down in the workshop, we're going to get started. Let's start by taking a look at a completed bathroom vanity and all the different component parts so that when we start our building, you'll have an understanding of all the different steps and parts. Now down here, this is called a kick plate, and it indents usually about 2 to 2.5 inches and allows for toe space when the unit's installed. Then we build the base and attach the bottom shelf and start the assembly of the shell or the carcass of the unit. The carcass is made out of 3/4 inch oak veneer plywood. Now this piece back here is called a strong back, and it helps tie the whole unit together. Since our unit is small and we'll be pushing it up to a wall with plumbing pipes, we decided not to use a 1/4 inch backing. But you may decide to do that on a larger unit. Okay, now on the front we attach a face frame, and the face frame looks like this in its unattached state, and it creates the openings for the door and the false front. Since we're going to be putting a sink in here, we won't be using a drawer, but the false front is designed to look like a drawer and fill that space.
The steps required to build our vanity are cut the plywood and assemble the carcass. Then assemble the face frame, attach the face frame to the carcass, build the doors and the drawers if required, sand and finish the cabinet, install the cabinet and attach the top, and finally install the drawers and the false front. Now, in addition to regular shop tools, we'll need a table saw, a router, clamps, and an orbital sander. Now let's get to work.
To start making our bathroom vanity, we start by ripping our plywood to the proper width, and I've set the saw at 17 1/4 inches. We'll be adding a 3/4 inch face frame onto that, so the total depth from the wall to the front of the unit will be 18 inches. Okay, now even though we have these extension tables, we're ripping a large piece of plywood, obviously, so you definitely need some help. And we've even got a roller stand out there to help support the weight. You ready, Les?
Uh-huh.
Okay, let me get my glasses on. We want to make sure that we keep our plywood running smoothly along that fence. Okay.
We ripped our piece of stock to the proper width, and now we're ready to cross-cut for the sides of our cabinet. And the important thing about this setup is to get this straight edge exactly square to the stock. We're going to use a circular saw for this cut, and it's a very simple setup. We know that the height of the total cabinet is 31 inches. We're going to have a 3/4 inch top, so we've set the straight edge up so that the blade will go through at exactly the 30 1/4 inch mark, which is just where we want it. Having this squared up and set in the right place, we're ready to make our cut. During our show today, you'll be seeing us both ripping and cross-cutting using the table saw. We've got a special blade that we're using for that. It's called a combination blade, and it's ideally suited for the work we're doing. We're going to be cutting both plywood and solid lumber. Plywood, with all the glue that's inside between the plies, is very rough on a plain steel blade. So we're using this blade that has carbide teeth that have been brazed on here to the plain steel. This carbide will stay sharper about 30 times longer than a plain steel blade will. It's also a combination pattern. That means it's set up to both cross-cut and rip very, very efficiently. So this is the ideal single blade to have in your shop. If you do want to consider one specialty blade, perhaps this other one over here, which is designed specially to cut plywood paneling. That's that thin 1/4 inch fancy paneling. These tiny little teeth, while not as tough as the carbide blade, will do a very good job cutting that thin plywood paneling, and you might want to consider that if you're going to do much of that. If you're not going to be cutting much plywood paneling, I would suggest this carbide blade in the combination pattern is the very best one for you to have in your shop. Now that we have all our plywood parts cut out, we're ready to assemble the carcass.
And to do that, we literally start from the bottom and work up. Right here is the base, and this front piece is called the kick plate, and this is the bottom of the cabin, obviously. Now the base is simply a rectangle of plywood glued and nailed together, and our base is 3.5 inches tall. Then we take our bottom, glue it, nail it to the base, square it up to the back, and then we end up with this indentation here for the kick.
And once we've got our base assembly all fixed, we're ready to put the sides on. And that's a very simple job. The only little trick that you might run into is how to cut this notch right here, because the notch does not match the bottom. It matches the face frame itself. As you can see, it goes right on there like that and leaves a slight reveal right under here. Other than that, there's no trick at all to this.
That's right. Now we're ready to glue it and nail the carcass together. So let's get going.
Yeah, let's do it.
We already nailed the bottom to the base, so now we're ready to erect our sides. We're putting glue along the sides so the unit's going to be nice and tight.
Before you put the clamps on, make sure you're very flush here in the front, because this is where the face frame goes on. Okay, let's put the clamps on.
Since these sides are going to show, you want to take extra care in nailing so that you don't ding your sides. Then we'll come back and set the nails using a nail set.
Okay, we're all set to put the strung back on. A little glue on each end, and then we just slip it right here into place and squeeze in on the clamp a bit just to hold it. Okay, just want to make sure this is flush, especially on the top, because we don't want this sticking up too high. It would interfere with the top.
When you're using the Mark V, it's a great idea to have the joiner set up with the table saw. That way you can do your joining, move your board right over and do your ripping. Then you can come back and clean up your saw cuts on the joiner. I finished ripping the stock for the face frame, and we're using solid oak to match the oak veneer plywood we're using for the carcass. And you can use whatever hardwood you choose to use. Now, if you're planning on painting your unit, you may decide to use a softwood like fir, but it doesn't stand up to the test of time the same way that hardwood does, and you won't get the same quality finish. Okay, now I'm set up right now to cut the rails to the correct length, and we'll need 3 rails, the horizontal pieces cut to exactly the same length. So I've set up this stop block here, and we'll use the miter gauge to guide the piece through, and we're going to get a nice, clean 90-degree cut, and we're ready to go.
Did you ever break a table or a chair when you were a little kid, and just before your mom grabbed you, you saw a joint like this? That's a dowel joint, and they're used because they're strong, efficient, and easy to make. That's what we're going to put our face frame together with. We're going to put one of those joints at each intersection of a part, the stiles and rails, so that this will be a very, very strong assembly. Now, before we do any drilling, however, we need to make sure that the face frame we cut is going to fit the carcass we already assembled. Now, I see that I've got 27 inches across here. I'm going to measure across the bottom of the carcass. I see I've got 27 inches right there. Notice I measured across the bottom of the carcass. The reason for that is that the top is not tight yet, and we could get a false reading. And, of course, the reason that we make the face frame after the carcass is assembled is to make sure it fits right. It's just like you wouldn't tie your shoes before you put them on your feet. That's why this gets made second. Now, the next thing I have to do is make sure that I mark